Hey, we're now beginning our third section of the information processing chapter. We talked last time about organizational systems, and we began to talk about memory, introducing Henry Mollison, who'd had surgery that impacted on his ability to create new memories. We revised our notions of declarative memory because of the extensive work that was done with Henry. We begin with memory at an initial stage. Much of this memory is temporary. The first stage is sensory memory. That's just our immediate perception of what's going on around us. We progress to working memory. This is generally seen as lasting longer than sensory memory, but less than 10 minutes. This is the memory you use when you look up a phone number and you hang on to it long enough to dial the number. From here, memory goes into this midterm storage. We still sometimes refer to it as short-term memory. This is what gets you through a test, but 5 years from now, the information may be gone. Or not, sometimes you do hold on to it. I should mention here that there is an ongoing debate if working memory is different from short-term memory or if they're actually part of the same process. I want to talk a little bit about working memory because it is so crucial to learning and functioning. It's sometimes described as your mental workbench or your mental blackboard, where you not only hold on to information, but you manipulate it to comprehend, to solve problems, to make decisions. Working memory is the memory that we begin to lose in our 40s. And before we hit our 60s, we will almost certainly have some decline in working memory. Also, for reasons I hope are obvious, working memory is critical to both reading and math achievement. Now, once that memory survives through the travails of sensory working in short term, it may get shunted into declarative memory, specifically what is called long-term memory. It's somewhat permanent. We think that sleep, probably dreams, are the mechanism that helps us sort and retain memories. Long-term memory is divided into two general types: episodic, which is your memory for events, and semantic, which is your memory for vocabulary and facts. So, what are some techniques to get memories into long-term storage? Well, the most common technique is rehearsal. Okay, this is where we say the items over and over and over and over again. This can work up to 7 items. That's the normal adult memory span. So if you have a list of 10 items, you may want to write them down. Another method is spaced repetition. Okay, we have Ebbinghaus to thank for this one. What you do with this is you practice the material, then you take a break. You really need to take a break of at least 10 minutes and then come back to see how much you can remember. A very old method, credited to the Roman orator Cicero, is to reconceptualize the material, putting the material into a memory palace. Here we associate the memory with parts of a location, often your home or your room, something you're very familiar with. I want to share a great example of the memory palace. I have Ron Walker to thank for his sharing of this one. Ron had spent most of his life working with attention disordered students and disadvantaged students. One year he was teaching 8th grade South Carolina history. His students were not the most enthusiastic people. They were bored and generally disinterested. Now, he's a very bouncy person. He talks up the course the first day, and then he starts to pass out a test the first day. The first thing that students want to know is whether or not this test counts. Well, of course it does. It's a daily grade. Now, the first question on this test is, what is the capital of South Carolina? On the board is this sentence. The students look at the test question, look at the board, look at the question, look at the board. He could always rely on somebody to raise their hand to point out this gross oversight. He would glance at the board and just shrug. Now, throughout the room, on the walls, the windows, the back of the door, the ceiling, wherever, were all the answers to all the questions. That first day, a student might whisper, "Where's 14?" And another student would answer, "On the ceiling." The tests were collected, graded, returned the next day. Now he would continue testing his students, giving the questions different formats, putting them in different orders. Fairly quickly, however, his students would be telling him that they had not had to look to get the answers. On the day of the 6 weeks exam, he gave them that same first test again, but he'd erased the board and taken down all the other answers. What he would observe is that students would often look into the direction where the answer had been and then respond. This is an example of the Loci or Cicero method or the memory palace. In this case, Ron was using his classroom. Another easy memory technique is chunking. Here you put short lists of items under conceptual topics. These are all animals, these are all breakfast foods, etc. It's easier to remember 4 lists of 4 things than to remember 16 things. Another method are acronyms. You remember this trick. You use the first letter to remind you of what needs to be recalled. For example, HOMES is the acronym for the Great Lakes. Acronyms are quick, but they aren't always lasting, especially over time. We end up remembering the acronym, but not the association. Okay, finally, we can also improve our memory by getting adequate sleep, eating a Mediterranean diet, exercising, socializing, meditating, learning another language, or having a stimulating hobby. Now there are 2 other types of memory techniques I want to talk about. The first one is keywords. When you use the keyword technique, you take the word or concept to be remembered, and perhaps using a similar or rhyming word, and you associate this with a visual image. For example, I still remember the Heisenberg principle, better known as the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. I associate it with a telegram. Yes, I know this dates me. On the telegram is the message, "Hi, send burgers," which I hope you hear as sounding like the name Heisenberg. I then picture identical twins leaving a White Castle hamburger place. They're carrying their delivery boxes of burgers. One of these twins will freeze in place. The other one moves so fast I can no longer see him. The Heisenberg principle says you cannot both say where something is and how fast it is moving. If you say where it is, it's frozen in place. If you say how fast it's moving, it's no longer in place. This is one example of keywords. You are only limited by your imagination when you use keywords. Now in the next section, we'll talk about the other memory technique, peg words, and finish up with declarative memory and talk a little bit about procedural memory.